Today, Rinpoche, while discussing the topic of the ritual for the Bodhisattva vows, gave a refresher course on all of the precepts of refuge found earlier in the Lamrim.
다른 아주 되는 데는 말을 좀 손자 왜 이제는 니슈 타송래 올해 저송 라자세 되는 데는 말아 손자 니슈 타송 올해 tin송 받는도 와 저주 손이 라자네서 되는 데는 말아.
Okay, so let's go. Okay, so we're going to start on page 66 in the English. We're on page 323 in the Tibetan, and right at the bottom in the Tibetan. And Jatsun we Lapjane Majipicha. Okay, so it's stating the precepts of refuge is where we'll begin today. Right in the middle of the English, page 66. Okay, Dixon.
What that Johnson Hajas, Conjuson La Johnson to Johnson to say what the Haja Carlo and Haja Ledamundua.
Bless her.
Haja. And
Jibu Chungonga.
Haja de la Denacasura. One of the Mengalin was nearly the Marbe. Haja said that how Conjuson La Johnson and Gabi Hajason, Drubi Hajason, Drew Marbe. Tama Joe Chung Kadu Chin Sabarua, Yanja the Lady Dua, what then the Kalega legend on the Mara.
The thing is on Garbi Lacha Dang.
Gabi Lajas, Conjuson, Gabi Lajason, Drubi Lajason.
Drupi Lacha.
Saji Conjula Johnson and Cardbrokers and the Saji. And then Sajil Karsagore, Johnson do all so the Gugu. Gabi Laja there. Jidem Rajel Johnson to Mares, Gabi Laja, Gaya.
Oh, Garpo, the Gapo Napo Yomari. Oh, Gongil Mepachi, Rinpoche. The Andrew. Okay, Gabi Lacha. Okay, so here it says, stating the precepts of refuge. Does anyone have volume 1 by chance? Stating the precepts of refuge. And it says the master should give here the precepts already explained in the context of the teaching of the person of small capacity. So when we look back in the person of small capacity, we find that there are advices on refuge. And then they divide the various advices into categories. Just give me one moment because we're going to end up there, so I might just let me get to the spot. Precepts. Okay. So there's the 3. There's Garbi Lacha and Drupi Lacha. I'm just trying to remember the names. Okay. Just see if there's a break here. Because just translating the actual word isn't going to make sense. Spoken advices and droopy established advices. I just want to find where it is in the Lamrim. I see the precepts here. 196. Jadan Jitju Dun Puik the Jantro Lacha. Jadan Jipju Dun. Jidun. Jadan Jitu Shedun. The Lapcha Dru.
What the name Jada Jidro? What the name?
The Yabudwe.
Jadan Jidro.
Then Yunten Gajan Chenpo Detsuku.
Jadan Sunju.
Tumo Lapja La Drutle. Tumo Gilaja La Drutle.
What the name could into Angadan?
Okay, so if we had the English, so you can turn to page 196. There are two types of precepts that are presented. It's prescriptive. That's right. Proscriptive precepts and prescriptive precepts. So those are the two categories of precepts. Actually, the Jipju je nga gutsogdu drupi laja sumne.
Tatana Tomunga Laja la Trules. Kanju Sonji Chabatan. And then Jesu Tembe Yana the Josunua. Hanshiba the Shabatan Nabichabas. Shabatan Nabichabas. What the Sun Legadua are. Tomunga Laja Dan. Tomunga Laja la Troje.
Okay.
Kanju Sonji Chabaje. Kanju Sonji Chaba. Sanji Kanju Chukanju Kanju Chabaje.
Less so.
Kanju Sonji Chabaje. Kanju Sonji Chabaje. Ta Sanji Kanju the Chukanju. Genu Kanju the Sulumazumaje. Gawataji Chabakarius. What the Dojo Jina Digo Jervata. Ta Sanji Kanju the Chukanju Chabakario. Sanji Kanju, Chukanju Marva. Sanji is the Chukanju, thank you, then the Sanji Lama. Sanji Taba, you are Madaba, you are
Lessa.
Mabu
Musum.
Sanji Kanju. Sanji Kanju, Chukanjula. Chukanju in a good end the London. Good end the London. Good end the London going to Palang. Papi Lang, Nicky Palang, Raja Palang, Tijan Palang soon. They didn't go there, so what does Chukanjuro?
Palan dan go den. Okay.
Chula Joseph Chude, Netu Baba, Ranje Baba, Sanji Babi Tujuji, go there the Laden to the Chukanju, Chula Joseph Chude order Jagures.
Then Sanjay going to the Tapa Damitapa Nika.
Sanji Kunju Taka the Chunkunzi, then good them but the Sanji Lauda, Sanji. Sansana, Numa but the Shiji to Samba and Bomba. Jason Shajal Ludwigeva, Shaja Tanchi Sanji Chenroda, Sanji. Shaja Tanchi Ludwigeva is Sanji. Sansan Numa but the Shiji Deva Samba is San Bomba. What the name is
Then Jepa.
Jeba's in the Shajal Ludwigeva.
Namshe.
I mentioned it.
Tamshi Chempa. Okay. Okay. Then the Drupi Gapi dan Drupi Lapcha the Ja dan Jiju Jinga. Okay, so then we're going to look at the general precepts right now, which are on page 196. And just as an aside, if you go back to 194, you'll find the prescriptive precepts and so forth. But Rinpoche wanted to go over these general precepts right now. So by recalling the distinctions and good qualities of the three jewels, go for refuge again and again. So here, we begin to analyze what the qualities of the three jewels are. So in order to do this, we need to know what they are and know what the differences between the three jewels are. We need to be able to know how many permutations are there between the Buddha and the Dharma, or the Dharma and the Sangha, or the Buddha and the Sangha, etc. So are there 3 permutations, 4 permutations? Are they mutually exclusive? Are they synonymous or of one meaning, if you will? So that's what it means here. So if we were to compare 2 subjects, if we were to compare the Buddha and the Dharma, what would we come up with? So we know, what is the Buddha? The Buddha can be divided into 2 different categories. The Buddha has the categories of the Buddha that are permanent and can be established as Buddha, and then categories that are impermanent that can be established as Buddha. And when we look at the word Sangje and we break down the etymology of that word, the Sang, what that really, the meaning of that is that the abandonment of the afflictions, the abandonment of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience, so arisen or awoken from that. And the J part is referring to the omniscience that is achieved by this. So this is basically the J is the state of all knowing. So the abandonment and the state of all knowing we find within that word Buddha in the Tibetan. So when we break down the etymology and we find out what each of the Sang and J mean, we find that the first Sang means to have abandoned the afflictive obstructions, the obstructions to omniscience. That's what it's referring to. And the J is referring to the omniscience, the achievement of omniscience. I'll look further into that too. So I can give you the Sang and the J. If there's an exact English word that'll make sense, I'll look into that. I know I've seen it. I just don't know at this very minute. So if we're comparing again the Buddha and the Dharma jewel, Buddha jewel and the Dharma jewel. So the Buddha has both of these qualities of permanent and impermanent. And then looking at the Dharma jewel, what is the Dharma jewel? The Dharma jewel is the Arya paths within the 3 types of beings continuums, the superior hearers, the superior solitary realizer, and the superior bodhisattvas. Those and Buddhas, superior Buddhas, those paths within those superiors continuums are the Dharma jewel. And then the cessations, the true cessations, are considered the Dharma jewel too. So the true cessations within the continuum of those hearers, solitary realizers, bodhisattvas, and the Buddhas, the true cessations. So this is what the Buddha jewel is referring to. And just as a note, depending on if Hinayana Mahayana school, you would determine what that Dharma jewel would be in that context of your school. So so that's why I say in the context of here, solitary realizer, bodhisattva, Buddha, because those cessations aren't all the same, just as an aside. So the Dharma jewel itself is divided into all of those various categories. So we have the true paths and true cessations, and those true paths and cessations are those of those hearers, solitary realizers, and the bodhisattvas, which you could say the bodhisattva true paths would be, a Buddha could fall under that as a completion. So that's what how we explain what each of those subjects mean. So the Buddha is a being who has abandoned all afflictions and has a state of omniscience and has aspects that are permanent and impermanent. When we compare those two, are there 3 permutations, 4 permutations? Are they mutually exclusive or synonymous? So that's Rinpoche asked that question. Musumushi Gewa Donchik, Nelapsan, then Triwa Jason, then Kontanda Salodan, Musumushi Gewa Donchik, Chapel, then Tanda Konsut Salodan. So anybody?
This is Lashan, Mara, Konsukale San Tangre. That's Sanji Gonju de member of this, Marvel.
Lesser.
Sanji Gonju member of this. And then Chu Gonju the hand of it. And then Ganu Gonju de. And then never tasking dramatic summer. What the Sanji Gonju de Chodan Babos, and then what the children de Jagur and the Pongur is Martin Gente, Sanji Gonju member of this. Member that the Nepal Taji in the Churun Asanderesha, tell men the Sagudu, Kalan the Sajimundus, Lagro. Then Sanji Gonju, Duji Kant and Sambatan. Palani Chene, and Churun Ponja de Pongure, London Yana Jegure, Nababa Yinta, Sanji Gunju, the Chatham Babu, Dada is.
Okay, so
that never Nepal, maybe men on Town, the Jin Sanji Dujala, Chisan Zibi Chudun to us, the Julaman and what the Niro. That's Sanji Tiju and Sanji member of
it. So the way that we can also look at this by comparison is to look at the different qualities of the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel, and show how they can be compared to various states and beings. For instance, when we look at the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel, the Buddha jewel is compared to a doctor. You go to a doctor to get a diagnosis, to find out what's wrong with you, to be healed. Then the doctor will say, do this, don't do that. If you engage in this activity, you will be sick. If you engage in this, you won't. So the doctor then advises you as to what to do once he or she has diagnosed whatever disease you have. So the Buddha is compared to a doctor in that the Buddha is able to understand what sickness we have, and what sickness we have are the afflictions, basically, and what kind of medicine or what kind of practice is needed in order to cure those afflictions. So the Buddha is looked at like a doctor. The Dharma is looked at like medicine. So once you have an illness of some sort, then you are prescribed some sort of medicine, and the Dharma is like that medicine that's prescribed. The Sangha jewel is like a nurse or a helpful aid that when you're sick is able to help you through that process, help you to overcome whatever that sickness is by aiding you with what the doctor suggests. So meaning aiding you, if we're looking at it in terms of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha aids you in your quest to abandon the afflictions and so forth that the Buddha has recognized and then diagnosed and then prescribed a particular practice for. So the Buddha being the doctor, the Dharma being the prescription, the medicine, and then the Sangha being those nurses that help administer and help with that process. So we find this is a good way to look at the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and to understand the differences between the three. And we see in Lord Maitreya's Sublime Continuum, where it states that recognize that you are ill, eliminate the cause of the illness, attain health, rely on a remedy. Likewise, you should recognize, eliminate, attain, and rely upon suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path, respectively. So here is another way to understand those differences because when we look at going back to the text, and it states the first of those 6 advices, or the 6 general advices. The first is to compare the differences of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And the way that you do that is by analyzing what each of them are. By recalling the distinctions and good qualities of the 3 jewels, go for refuge again and again. So here it just goes through quickly in the English, but when you read it in the Tibetan, what stands out to the Tibetan reader as an aside is distinctions, good qualities. So those mean very specific things in relation to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So that's the whole key, recalling distinctions and good qualities. Distinctions is referring to, are there 3 permutations, 4 permutations? That's what distinctions means if a logician is looking at that. How many are there? How can we compare these 2 phenomenon, and what do we establish them as? Okay, Dig, sorry. Okay. So if we go, the Menga is the spoken lineage. The oral lineage, where is it? Oral tradition, oral lineage. The compendium of determinations. Okay, so if you go to page 193, actually, in the English, 192 and 193, you'll find the beginning of the precepts. Mengale Zhōngwala Ni. So you'll find first how they appear in the compendium of determinations, and then how they appear in the oral tradition. So it says how they appear in the compendium of determinations has 2 sets of subdivisions. So this is very important, Rinpoche said. So Rinpoche said, please repeat where this is in the text. So in the English, if we go to page 192, we find the beginning of this. This is Gutso. This is where it begins. Once you have gone for refuge, the stages of precepts, and then that's where we find how they appear in the compendium and how they appear in the oral tradition, and then we find that it divided.
Mengali Joala Nile, Soso Adan, Tomogul Hajas, Soso Atenalulta, Gabil Hajas, Dubil Hajas, the Lady Dua, Ambula Ni, Gabil Hajas, Dubil Haja, Soso Atenalula. Conjus on la Jasun, Gabil Hajason, Conjus on la Jasun, Dubil Hajason, Yondua, Tombo Gabil Hajason to Yondua, Tombo ne. Nyangale deba ndo nyangde je kanju no lo kanju nyangale deba le kanji son la chandro wa kanji kansa kanji ma kanji ane ju kanji ne kunju son la chandro wa tene ya da genye des kunju son la chandro wa da genye se me ta go je ro da ya da genye de na don han ne jen da la jiao son ma yin no 사지 건줄로 저수도 사뒤 사진다 원쇼도 전줄로 소도를 저수도 주요 말레스 근데 저런가 로버제로 지서 도주는 되게레스 흰 답은 저주요 말레스 유라제다도 잡은 말베다 더덜레 네 나사 답이체도 말메 데루지스 러버다브레스 저수도 주요 말레스 나도 하는 제달라 저수와 많이 노 소지군으로 저수도 가빌 하자들 되는 거와 Donyandele, Sanji Ganju, Nyangal Debale, Kanji son la Jandroa, Tenayada Ganyantes, Conju son la Jazurugente, Yada Ganyeres, Nando, Lana Jenda, La Sanji Ganju la Jazundru, Nando, Lana Jenda, Negone Bidin, Jazundru Mares, Nega Rubujerus, Jena Digres, Jazundru Mares, Jazu Sua Maino, Tambi Chula, Jandroa, Session Swebi, Sentences, Chukunjula Jazu Yu, Sinjela Nurse Bongures, Chukunjula Jazu Rusadu, Sinjela Nebachi Mares, Ne Tambi Chula Jandroa, Session Swebi, Sentences, Sinjela Nebachi, Soya Water Jeju Mares, Sentences, Chukunju Gabi Lajaji, Gandun Lion Jandroa, Medi Jenda Ruba Mis, Gandun La Jazu Son Yu, Drum Mediba Dan, and Ruju Mares, Takante, Mediba the Yandu Deba Yinaku, Mediba Jeba Naji Jeju Marison Wajere. And then Mediba Yandu Deba Yinaya, Susu Senalo, Mediba Naji Majin Digro. Gandun Lion Jandroa, Medi Jenda Ruba Mi, She Somba Gabi Lajason Tangadoa. Hajen la tajirmaji tanman deshiro deshi dunyande le jirmaji deshi jigadwa hajen la josumandwa dan senjen la hajen la josumandwa to sanju kunju la gabi la jares sanju kunju la josu sonyu hajen la josu ju mares chu kunju la josu sonyu senjen la neba dan so bonju mares ne se bon Medi Jenda Manduba, Somos, Ganila Josu, Gru Medi Jenda Mandubas, Mediba the Yandu Deba Yena, Mediba Jeba Najin Jeju Mares, and the Sanjit and Sanjus Ludu to the Mediba the Yandu Deba Yena, Kosan Jutu Maro, what end up Jugu Mando. Medi Jenda Manduba Somos. Tela tambu ne tajir mji de sebu zo marbe tambu ne jiden bel ha jabu ta choju so la phuji josu mji nas jiden bel ha jabu ta jiden ha no ne tra shu jabu ta choju tu sen jiro da wan shu la so ba choju la so ba la phuji josu mji nas jiden bel ha tra shu tu phuji josu mji na and Edazu Chibi, Jedatan, Lola, Tachimus, Tanga to Loguditi Monchowate, Edatan Lutan Redimendo, Loguditi, what the Sul Johnson to you, Maris, Hatrabutul Johnson Medina, and Ulajeta, Loguditi, Edatan, Lutusul Johnson Canendus to you, Maris, Jedatan, Lola, Tachimus, Tanga su baba gulumba tu su lo wate santa ya wate nuk shiga deba chibu wata. Te wale zhigan lhatan lo na chi yuebi tangwa na chagari yuedi yuejir wata. Wate santa kuchi shibu sogari da. An ko me sheken su til chawsun rogo yuejir wata. Wate ni chi yue mara songa jirma chi.
Leso.
Churu ngal rogo jiru chi sana digari es.
Leso.
An wate chawsun rogo yue mara es.
Leso.
Latrabudan Chanju Su Lang, Puji, Josum Zina, Yedazu Chibi Shidatan, Lola Tachemus, Tanga Su Loku Didi said that what the Injiro, what the Sul Josum Canendo Yu Maris, could the Joe two Maris. Ryan could not write by Indian Life Switch Japanese, couldn't call Kudu Nazuka Nature to Mari cham go to the Kurun Kual Kune, Ramayo Mare, and Kutu Nazul Jotu Mare so da. Ryan Kut Nara Jimbaye, Jiten Lai Soshi Chaba News. What to say in Dabin said?
Then Rinpoche, the cheek thingy Jason Charon, the the Shilopi, the Trobo Digsong Yene, then Miti Dayan, Chu Labsang. Chu Labsang.
Mati Dayan said, "Not this was Gomu Ludu, not to go Matiba Nadu, then could send you to Marota.
Okay.
Gomu Ludu down. What to go Matiba Nadu, Deba Ina, send nobody to Maro.
Okay.
Manuna
Okay.
Jigo.
Manuna. Okay. Tuche.
Matiba Nadu, then Matu Java Naji Jen, Sanjuki, Nambi, Nalet Yandu Rota.
Lesso.
And the Jigo Maris.
Lesso.
Manana
Okay.
Jigo.
Lesso, not lesson. Okay, Tuche Rinpoche. So now if you want to turn forward, we're the page 194. Rinpoche wanted to just first point, no one has this, but Rinpoche wanted to first point out where the actual beginning of it is. And then now we're going to 194 to go over the proscriptive precepts and the prescriptive precepts. So we've gone over this already, but Rinpoche is just re-going over it because it says in the text the teacher should now go over this. So Lama Tsongkhapa says that, so now that's why we're doing this. So the proscriptive precepts, these are explained in terms of proscriptive and prescriptive precepts. The proscriptive precepts, so from the Great Final Nirvana Sutra, the Great Final Nirvana Sutra states, "Those who go to the three jewels for refuge come closer to the truly virtuous. They never go to other deities for refuge. Those who go to the sublime teaching for refuge harbor no harmful murderous thoughts. Those who go to the community for refuge do not associate with non-Buddhist philosophers." So here we find the advices given for the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. From the Great Final Nirvana Sutra. And first, the advice that's related to the Buddha. So it says, "Those who go to the three jewels for refuge come close to the truly virtuous. They never go to other deities for refuge." So this is first the advice in relation to the Buddha refuge, or the Buddha jewel. The advice related to that is that one does not go for refuge in other worldly deities or others that are not thus gone, that are not Buddhas. So that's the first advice related to the Buddha refuge. But you can go and ask certain local deities and spirits and so forth for help, but you can't go for refuge to them. So there's a very big distinction that's made here. And Rinpoche said that this becomes very important, especially for Tibetans. In the Tibetan tradition and in Tibetan culture, there is a large emphasis on this, and there's an idea that in the mountains and in various forests and so forth, there are these spirits, there are these local deities that exist and that people make offerings to and so forth. So this part is really written to those people, those practitioners. And Lama Tsongkhapa is pointing it out when he goes on to give his commentary, being from Tibet and realizing that if you didn't know this precept, it'd be very easy to go for refuge to some of these local spirits and deities that you see people making offerings to. So it's mainly what's important is one's motivation when trying to keep this precept. One needs to realize that if you're going to a local deity, god or spirit that is not an enlightened being, then you're going for some reason, some protection or something, look at it as offering, giving a gift for protection, as a friend who's helping you, but definitely not as putting your going for refuge in a complete whole way. More like looking for someone to help you, encouraging help, encouraging aid. So this is what is related to the Buddha refuge. In the Dharma refuge, those who go to the sublime teaching for refuge harbor no harmful murderous thoughts, so no harm to other living beings. Those who go to the community for refuge do not associate with non-Buddhist philosophers. So this is made clear, this sentence is clarified here, where it says, thus, Lama Tsongkhapa begins to give his commentary. Thus, there are 3 positive precepts: not going to other deities for refuge, abandoning harm and malice toward living beings, and not befriending non-Buddhist philosophers. So Lama Tsongkhapa uses the word befriending instead of association. And then the commentaries go on to say that as long as your relationship with that non-Buddhist practitioner doesn't cause your faith, belief, or practice to lessen, then it's fine. Then that relationship's fine. You can live in the same room every day with that person. But if it causes your views to weaken, then you shouldn't associate or befriend. This is all for the safety of your own practice, so that your own practice isn't harmed or hindered, or you don't become confused about the teaching. So that's what the point of this refuge is not saying you can't associate with a non-Buddhist philosopher. It's saying, and then it says befriending, and then the commentary says befriending in such a way that it becomes influential, because friends have influence. So this word influence is the word Rinpoche pointed out. So as long as you are not influenced by them, if that friendship doesn't amount to influence, then it's okay. So Rinpoche spent some time on that, and then I asked him again. So the word influence, I think, is the best English word to use for what they're saying you don't want to have happen. So you don't want to be influenced and lose your faith or lose your beliefs because of a negative person. So it says, not going to other deities for refuge is explained as follows. Since you should not even hold worldly deities such as Rudra and Vishnu as your ultimate refuge, what need be said about Nagas and the other local divinities who are hungry ghosts? So if we aren't to go for refuge to Shiva and beings like this, Brahma and so forth, and Rudra here and Vishnu, there's no point to even mention that we shouldn't go for refuge to a hungry ghost or to some local deity or divinity, when we know that the advice is clearly that we should not go for refuge to even these beings that are considered gods in non-Buddhist traditions. So while it is improper to entrust yourself to beings with full belief in the 3 refuges, it is proper to merely seek these beings' help for temporary religious purposes, just as, for example, you would seek the help of a benefactor in acquiring the means of livelihood, or consult a doctor for the cure of an illness. So here you're looking for help. You're looking for services to be rendered, as opposed to putting one's complete faith, going for refuge to that being. The second preceptive, Rinpoche, Cheran de J. Rinpoche de Chu Gonchu Lobsang Lobsang
de Ganju de Belumalo de Santan de Bamboo Bel Chu Tambo Bamboo Chu Tavares Bamboo to Santan de Sud was Bamboo Zubres Bamboo Zuzan and the Shuguyan and Nyama Gaju Saja Gulu or the Tagaran Bamboo Gulu Sud Jaguars. Chimbi Pantun the USRS.
Lesser. Rinpoche, then a Chu Laren Chenmo Kabar Kason.
Yeda Sujibi, Jeda Dan, Lola, Tachimesa, or the Jaimba. Then, Taon Majim Jitason, Tean, Joson La Yimachines, Sanji Gonju, Chukunju, Ganukan to the Yimachine, and then you like it out to the Joso, Johnson to Gio Mares, Songuares. Then Joson La Yimachines, Sanji Gonju, Chukun to Ganukan to Son the Yimachine, and then you like it out to Lunginam, Rongomares, the Sanji Nyandik Gosu, Swan Teres, Jeremiah. Monoa Inges Tadala, Treji, Chudenji, Shawanga Jilla, Tujo, Sanla, Moro mes. And the haloge that in the Edata, ne Lotan to Sula, Tunga Rubiches and Rujibal, the name Madibaka, Digger his Moro mede. Puna, Jindala Tui Rujuanas, Jindala and all the Saat on the Rubiches, Lagros, Jindal Johnson Romaros. Membalangal Mentor, which is Johnson Romaros, then Dabres, Membala Nancy, Reduchawa Genos, what about the
Then they get Caso. The NGK, they low. So while it is, again, Rinpoche wanted me to go through, while it is improper to entrust yourself to these beings without full belief in the three refuges, it is proper to merely seek these beings help for some temporary religious purpose, just as, for example, you would seek the help of the benefactor in acquiring the means of a livelihood or consult a doctor for the cure of an illness. So here, you are not... It says without full belief in the three refuges. It doesn't mean when you have full belief you can then do that. It means that you shouldn't have, the way it reads in the Tibetan is that this level of full belief that you have in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, this going for refuge, this belief, should never be transferred over to worldly beings or spirits or any kind of deity that is not enlightened. So that's the way it really reads, is that, so it says, while you can though, it says, seek these beings help for temporary religious purpose, just as, for example, you would seek the help of a benefactor in acquiring the means of livelihood or consult a doctor for the cure of an illness. You wouldn't go, Rinpoche said, you wouldn't take your doctor as the object of observation of your refuge. You wouldn't go for refuge to your doctor, Rinpoche is saying. So you would look at a spirit or a deity like this. And just as a translator's note, we have to realize what going for refuge means in this tradition. You'd say, you can use the English word, I'm seeking refuge in my doctor, but that's not the kind of refuge that we're talking about when we're saying going for refuge here. This is a complete faith and confidence that's incontrovertible in all topics, not just medicine, every topic, an omniscient being. So it's that level of going for refuge isn't the same. So I just want to clarify that as a translator, because that word refuge is very, very strong and heavy in this context and doesn't mean just looking for some protection. It means looking for ultimate protection against yourself and your negativities and so forth. So it transcends what we would normally think of refuge and looking for help or protection. I think everyone knows that, but I just want to clarify that to anyone who's watching. And when we use these words, we've spent months and months on the word refuge here in class, so we all know this as students, but if others watching haven't done that, it might just seem like, why wouldn't you go for refuge to a doctor? So sorry for that note. And then, so that's where Rinpoche ended. And so where did some of this idea first come from, where these spirits and deities were used as objects of refuge? Why did this even occur? Rinpoche said it's really the influence of the Bon tradition in Tibet. When we look at Tibetan Buddhism and why in Tibet we have these spirits and different deities that we have to divide up and figure out, it's the Bon tradition that had all the spirit worship already in the culture, and it came into the Tibetan Buddhism. Diksan.
Tā ngā tu sāngcī kuñchū, shū kuñchū, gāni kuñchū, ngā tu kāpa yuwa sā na tēyā tā ngā tā pārā ngā tā, pārā sā ngā tu bidī suwās, wā tēlē tē kā tu sāngcī tu yuwa rē sā, bidī suwā. Anā gōnyē tā lā tēnyī tā kāpa yuwa sā na pārā ngā tā, pārā sā ngā tā, wā tēnyī tā gōnyē tā lā tēnyī tu yuwa tā mā rā bē, tōnglāng gōlāng. Nyatū tōnglāng gōlāng, rāñcē tōnglāng gōlāng, tējīn tōnglāng gōlāng tā sū kā sō, 고대달라데 요아레 귤데메 강다도 근육은 주로 봐봐 what did this on do?
So then when looking at the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel, we look at the mantra within the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangati Bodhisoha. Then the Gendun Gunchu Dang Garshene the Yanjar Suranang, a true Gugumare. Then the Gate Gate Paragate Parasangati Bodhisoha Palang Ahako do. You know
the Buddhist Kadu to Sanji Gonju to Ores.
Then Chugonchu Kabiore.
Parangate Parasangati Ni Kadu the Lung Chugonju to Ganugonju.
Oh, okay. Two chain. Okay. Lesser. So look at the. I just want to make sure this was clear the way I was saying it. Looking at the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel, and the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, the mantra that's within that, Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangati Bodhisoha. This mantra has implicitly within it the 5 paths, the 5 paths of the hearer, solitary realizer, and bodhisattva. So Teata Om Gate Gate, those first 2 gates are ordinary paths, ordinary beings, not superior paths, the path of accumulation and the path of preparation. So when we're speaking of the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel, we are not speaking in terms of those ultimately. We're speaking of the next 3. Paragate, Parasangati, and Bodhisoha. So we look at those terms. The path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. These 3 paths of the hearer, the solitary realizer, and bodhisattva are what the 3 jewels are referring to. Bodhisoha is the path of no more learning. So this is the Buddhahood. This is what would be Buddhahood or enlightenment in the hearer, solitary realizer tradition. It would be called nirvana, but it's an enlightenment according to their tradition. So that individual being would be would be enlightened. But when we speak of Buddha jewel, that Buddha jewel has to be a Buddha enlightenment. So yes, the hearers, solitary realizer, and bodhisattvas have their enlightenments, but Buddha jewel necessarily is the Mahayana bodhisattva's enlightenment, the Melulam, the no more learning path. Bodhisoha is referring to the Buddha jewel. The Dharma jewel, we find the true paths and true cessations in the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and no more learning. We find the true paths and cessations within true paths within the Melulam, the Lam Yurbe. The Melulam Lam Yurbe. Okay, so there are paths. The Sanjay Lam. Okay, so there is a Buddha path. Okay, I'm just, there's so many words going around in my head. When we look at true paths and true cessations, we have true cessations that occur on the path of seeing, the path of meditation, the path of no more learning. So true cessations that occur in the hearer, solitary realizer, and bodhisattva vehicle. So we can say all 3 in that case. So the Buddha jewel was Buddha necessarily, but the Dharma jewel can be the true paths and true cessations in those beings, hearers and solitary realizers and bodhisattvas continuums on the paths of seeing, meditation, or no more learning. So necessarily Arya paths. And then the Dharma, the Sangha jewel, the community jewel, the Sangha jewel, refers to those beings who are hearers, solitary realizers, or bodhisattvas on any among the superior paths. So the path of seeing, the path of meditation, the path of no more learning. So when we look at in terms of true paths and true cessations, we find them on the Paragate, Parasamgati, and Bodhisoha. When we look at it in terms of beings who are on pathways, who are the Sangha jewel, Paragate, Parasamgati, Bodhisoha, the path of seeing, meditation, and no more learning. And then when we look at the Dharma jewel itself, I think I already did Paragate, Parasamgati, Bodhisoha, and then the Buddha jewel, Bodhisoha. Diksun.
Tibetan 같은 것도 바람가도 바라상가도 무디를 마디 시다게 죄자 자치부 인사です. 제부 중어도 도모유 랑가, 리도 도모유 랑가, 제비 준비 랑가 그거 어떤 죄도서です. 제부 중어도 도모유 랑가 소나주로.
Langa, Chungo Yuribe. Okay. So these five paths, Teata Om Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasangate, Bodhisoha, become very important in the tantric tradition. And then also we find various scopes or capacities of these five paths as well. So we could say that there's a path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning for teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity, and the teachings for beings of great capacity. So we could say that there are five paths for those three capacities as well. Capacity is referring to persons of who have those capacities, but I think everyone knows that. Just to clarify it. Okay, so we'll take a short break and be right back. Sheda Sobeldu. Yining 8 sample consistent. Happens. Is there some?
Oh, yeah. 당아주 상지 건축도지 뭐시 들어와. 아는 가주 상지 레야 요르 베스 지베이나. 아는 가주 가드 레야 요 말이 슈바스 가드 레야 요스 로고지 말어. 힌두스가 원주 레야 요르. 아네 가주스 알라 레야 요르스 로고지 말다.
레서.
다진 로고스 제마도.
레서.
나마 상지베 아는 가주 상지 레야 요르 베스나. 아는 세제 그걸 상지야 요르스. 세제 그걸 상지 그리요 요르스. 추지 일라 예매시 린타데 로마이 대비 추지라기 어제 사지 그리드 sentient 타질 쳐도요레스 what is station amar
Lesser. Various religious traditions, other religious traditions have different objects of refuge. So Christians go for refuge to God. Hindus go for refuge to Shankarji, Shiva. The Muslims go for refuge to Allah. So we see various objects of refuge that are posited by these different religious traditions. We as Buddhists state that the Buddha is our refuge. So how can we say that? What does it mean? And is there a way for us to show or know that there is this Buddha refuge? And the way that we begin to understand it, to be able to assert it, is to look at what is called Buddha potential or Buddha nature. And that is something that Buddhists consider all sentient beings to have. This Buddha nature, this Buddha potential, that everyone has. So Rinpoche said, I think it's important for us to talk a little bit about this right now.
다 상지 리드 가르스 나가서 이지셔봐 줘로 이지셔봐 도도 상지 리드스.
So the Buddha potential, we begin by discussing the mental consciousness. So the mental consciousness is our Buddha potential.
당아서 이지셔봐 되래 최 단지 시야가 누가 요아레스. 디바 단지 봉화가 누가 요아레스.
So our mental consciousness has the ability to cognize all phenomena, reach the state of full cognition or omniscience, as well as the ability to abandon all of the misdeeds, abandon all of the afflictions.
생들로 어떨로전 전에 생들지 돈이 고야 샤주 생고야 어떤 제바이나 근데 라제제 다 녀모부터 시제바 갈래갈래 마타는 거 다네 근데 갈래갈래 솔랑 줄랑 솔랑 고랑 물로랑 사만들어요 그래서
So this mind can be slowly converted or transformed by studying emptiness, by studying the mind that aspires to enlightenment, and by practicing, one will eventually be able to get rid of the self-cherishing attitude, get rid of the grasping at things as being truly established, and by this process, traverse the various paths that are required to become enlightened, so to become a Buddha. So one is able to go through the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning by transforming this mind as one goes through those stages.
나서 보고 저중 ABC 라나 그 최소나 메시바도 엔드도 네번로도 와서 말해.
So if a small child is ignorant of the alphabet, then he or she is given things to practice and said to go practice A, B, C, D, E, F, etc. Then this small child's state of ignorance related to the alphabet can be extinguished through this practice and study. So then he or she is no longer ignorant and has a state of knowing related to the alphabet. Digson.
Then azu sendello dejim donge deba kunju deba godenlade dejim ta chudu toni tu santaba ina kale shewures.
In the same way, we are able to understand what the truth of suffering means, what the origin of suffering is, what the truth of cessation is, what the true paths are. We're able to understand and comprehend in this way the 16 attributes of the Four Noble Truths and emptiness and so forth.
산지 넘어가 수도 잡으래서 공단데 고네 어디 솔랑솔랑 돌고 물로라 tud 산지 좀래서.
Initially, Buddha was exactly like we are right now. And then he or she, because there are other Buddhas, but we're speaking of Shakyamuni right now, went through the 5 paths, the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. And then, as a result, the Buddha achieved Buddha. The Buddha Shakyamuni achieved Buddhahood. So we can see how there was initially, he was as we are, and then through this transformative process was able to become a Buddha. So in our minds, we don't want to have suffering. We want to have we want to be free from suffering. We want to have happiness. Likewise, all sentient beings have the same sentiment. They want to be free from suffering and have a state of happiness. So the sign that there is an abandonment of suffering and an achievement of happiness is this desire for happiness and desire for the suffering to be abandoned. The fact that there is this desire means that it shows there's a sign for the potential for that achievement, because you know the difference, so you've had it. So the sign that it can be achieved is the fact that you wish for it. Digsun, in this case.
That's cerebral cerebral colors.
So scientists, wonder what scientists would say if we as Buddhists were to ask questions of them like these. I know that in the Christian and the Hindu tradition there are some other, they posit other things in control, so that wouldn't really apply. But wonder if we were to ask the scientific community questions using our philosophy as the basis, how they would respond. So if you research and analyze in this way, then you are really going to understand what the Buddha jewel is, what the Dharma jewel is, and what the Sangha jewel is.
Tondula soba, this is sentient rota. Mutan tondula soba to so-called debatan, diragoya, debatan, chingwatan, tabak donga. Then the gura shoba, soya yorota, redalo, segrota, gura shoba tan, tamboba. Well, the tato to tambo, yado to tambo, tabatan, chido, tamboba tan, metejin to. Less so.
The Chugon.
La soba, Samba dan Ju, and then Sijan la, Nobad and Swabumba was what the Dabu, the Sijan Nergy, Nobad Jeju Mares, Nersaponza, and the Jbon, this one is that.
Less so. So we've now going back to the first edition, to the prescriptive precepts. We're in the 3 prescriptive precepts. We've gone through the first one. So now we're at the second prescriptive precept. So we went over the one in relation to the Buddha jewel and abandoning other refuges. The second prescriptive precept entails refraining from doing harm or injury to living beings through thought or deed. This injury includes actions such as beating, binding, imprisoning, nose piercing, and overburdening humans, animals, and so forth. So in Tibet, we have this tradition of farming where the cows and cattle have rings through their nose and are dragged, led around by their nose, if you will, with these hooks or rings, and binding, tying up. Beating is just hitting, imprisoning, nose piercing, overburdening humans, animals, and so forth. So all of these things fall under the category of not doing harm to living beings. That's the actual precept, not harming any living beings. And then harm is just details of how you could harm are given here. So that's number 2, the prescriptive precept related to the Dharma jewel. Decent. Chugonchusa.
That's about Ganegonjula just Mediba the Trundimesh Sajuro, then the digital Gores, Sumba Ne, Ganegonjula Josu, Mediba the Marusa, and then Jagores, Conjusola, Josu Yimeshations, Conjusola Josu Yimeshations, Goa Sheba Natan, Tumba Majiba was, Conjusola Yimeshe. And the conjugal Yabumar, Sanju Dojare, Genu Dojare second, the Sun Dabu Jeju Mares, Dabu Majid, Dabu Majibatala, Mediba the Trundimages, the Nijil Gores, Madus Hell, the Doja Man, and Mediba Nadu Den and Digo. Conjugal Yemeshin, Goa Sheba not dancer. That Mediba was the Sanju Yemeche. Kubatadinga to Suda Tuba Jeju Mares.
Okay, so now the third prescriptive precept is related to the Sangajul. So this is refraining from befriending or being around people of other philosophies that will influence you negatively. So here, third prescriptive precept entails not agreeing with those who do not believe in the three jewels as a refuge and who repudiate them. So here, this not agreeing with is explained as not being influenced by, not giving in to their encouragement to abandon the Dharma, to abandon the three jewels. So it's, if there is no non-virtue created by the relationship, there's no negativity created by the relationship, then this doesn't apply. This only applies if there's some sort of negative influence going on that is against the Dharma. Now, you can have someone who disagrees with you, that's your friend, but that disagreement shouldn't lead you down to an incorrect view or influence you to a state where you have an incorrect view. So that is the meaning of number 3. So those are the 3 prescriptive precepts, and now we'll move on to the 3 prescriptive precepts. Those are proscriptive, these are prescriptive. Lapsar.
That Ruby Laja Sung the Karesana Sanji Gonzula Chazu Song Yu Sanji Kuzu Remen Treba Lenye Chinda Shila and Che Madashin Ujesa Majapatan Taman Juba Suji Magubatan Nyeto Pune Tumbatar Kuishin to Jude Shitin Les Ngomoluruji Deshi Tetra Deshi Kuzu Shin Le Chang Jeba Chendawa Chendayang Rong Kebechu Che Song Sos Londanji Le Shebu Seji Lubatan Melube Ganuna La Lambi Gujenji Chuji Chusan Chumayimba Jishi Shebala Subi Ngeme Jinda Shebango Juji Shebi Goji Mandawa Juji Yubi Chusin Nyayi Risu Chede Tumba Sonji Dune Shaji Jabi Bado Tundu Deba Somba Dans Long Tensi Le Tumba Kowaji Nyangale Debi Jezo Jabun Zedenji Chuden Chenmo Shedu Juba Na Lama Sheki Ditabi Chuden Shedu Juba Zana Zamba Nazim Meba Na Simba Jun Meshisos Najini Shabala She Leba Simba Na June Langeji Seji Trebu Shedu June Chuden La Tane Ngashin Luchung La Kinyeba Zanden to Chewa Sombe Kuzula Datan Dendra Woshi Mamawa Dan Jenji Kuzusu Juzomle Druba Chenmo Druba La Shawatan Tele Dubi Katusu Shamuronso Morongo Nenjuba Chembe Chula Janji Kushi Zisupi Delenye Chendas Lena Rombanga Ge Shembe Seju 세르지 신에 레발라 슈베스 슈시네 제준자메야 제콜라 멜레바메 사주는 진송네 네 슈자데 슈자 주심바 쿨랑 테터 제게스 추치 치지 인지 치발라 야 마고바 봉시 라본 타만 주바타 손도 주바타 사담보 야와 주바타 하나 자네 코아나 네 고요소 마고바 타제 본데 건축 따르 고버시바오스 게시 생아이 생아와 서로 된장바 통하나 타무자네 담 세당 마누바나 타무자게 중앙에 수행바나 하바시 로지봉도와 니제봉도 하바시 콩라 최면예발라 이 켄시 수데기 출라 꾸바 제네 그 아즈네 아자므로 머로송네 하버드 데네 춘예게스 샤라이 시네 장 라자 출라 좀 지지시바 노데 추던 추마라 마고바 싫어치 유인스 모바다디 데게 추기 모비 주마소스 델레모나 제도송스 다들 뭐무도 갈래갈로 말아
NGK selpudu then donda the consul care too
다 가빌 하자와데 사제주 구조 가빌 하자로 사제라 쳐서 소유 루빌 하자 가지고 거르잖아 사제주 구조를 못해봐 레네 찐다시라 사무다 가데 팬티 말베 팬티 시단던데 네 제마시 주주던 제베 어들 준주지주 말레스
맞아요.
어디 손도 말베 셴문도지 오제사 맞아 투바사요서 발자던 제주 말에 상살이 하고 그래스 다만주바 수지 먹어봐 다스 안내야 된 시단던 블렌라드네 나 다만주는 내가 제방군 제주스 어떤 제주 말레스 다만주바 해도 보네 덤바다를 덤비고도 신그 소바연시 사진고에 뭐준도 시작하고 그래스 덤바다를 그비 신도 주대 소송도 고물로 셰딘레 제다를 대시 고조 신레장 제바 젠다로 개비 추스 대시 고조 신그 소바던데 있나요?
the goal
개바족 최고래스 개비추 제송소도 지가래 주나.
Okay, so here we have a large amount of history, historical stories, Rinpoche is saying, presented to explain the advices in these prescriptive precepts. So it says there are 3 prescriptive precepts. The first is to treat images of the Buddha as objects of reverence, as though they were the teacher himself, not pointing out their faults regardless of their quality and not disrespecting them or treating them with contempt by putting them in dishonorable places, pawning them, etc. So here we have a quote from the friendly letter. So here, images of the Buddha, and then when you see the teacher in capital letters, it's referring to Shakyamuni specifically. So it says, as though they were the teacher himself. So as though when you have an object, no matter what it's made of, how it's constructed, you need to imagine that if that is supposed to be Buddha Shakyamuni, that you imagine that it is actually Buddha Shakyamuni. And so that's how you should relate to that image. And you shouldn't show any less reverence than that. If you have an image, you should imagine that it's the actual being there. So it says, as though they were the teacher himself, not pointing out their faults regardless of their quality, not disrespecting them. Later in the stories, you'll see the not pointing out their faults regardless of the quality. Lord Atisha gives advice on that. And then it says not disrespecting them or treating them with contempt by putting them in dishonorable places, by putting them somewhere dirty, or using them as money, pawning them, using them as merchandise or something that you can make money from. So you shouldn't do that with any images of the Buddha. So you shouldn't sell them, make money off them, and you also shouldn't judge them or keep them somewhere that's not where you would let Buddha himself stay. So just as a learned worship an image of the Sugata, whatever it is made of, even wood, so no matter what the material is that a statue is made of, or no matter what, how a tanka is painted, any image whatsoever, no matter how it's constructed, created, what it's made of, if it is an image of the Buddha or of a Buddha, then it has to be treated exactly the same way as if it were made of all precious substances. It needs to be looked at it as actual Buddha. So then the exegesis of the discipline relates how Manakavila, who slandered the community of learners and those who with no more to learn in 18 different ways, saying, for example, what do you know of the teaching or non-teaching elephant head? It was reborn as a monstrous fish with 18 different heads. So he called them 18 different names, the community, and was slandering them, and then he was born as this monster with all these different heads. And it said, remaining an animal, so he stayed as an animal from the time of Kashyapa, the Buddha before Shakyamuni, until Buddha Shakyamuni. And it says, from the time of teacher Kashyapa until the time of the king of the Shakyas, the Buddha. The Sudraka basis of discipline relates how after the nirvana of teacher Krukachanda, King Karamat ordered that a great stupa be built. A workman cursed it twice, exclaiming, "We'll never be able to complete a stupa this huge." Later, when it was nicely finished, regretted his curses and used his wages to have a golden bell fashioned and placed on the stupa. As a result, he was born as a sweet voice with a ugly complexion and a tiny body, but a beautiful voice. Thus you should never quibble over the quality of images, despise other for using fine materials for image and the like, or for making them large, discourage their makers from finishing them and the like. So not only should you look at them as objects of reverence, as if the Buddha is there himself, you also shouldn't become mad because someone's spending more money than you think they should on a statue, etc. So you should never have those kind of harbor those kinds of feelings. It is said that the great yogi Shanchup Rinchen once gave a statue of Manjushri to the elder for him to examine. He asked, "How good is this? If it is good, I will buy it with the 4 gold coins Romba Gargewa gave me." The elder replied, "Venerable Manjushri's body has no defects. The sculptor, though, is middling," and placed it on his head. It is said that he did the same with respect to all finished images. So Lord Atisha would not comment on the image, on Manjushri, because he said there's only perfect Manjushris. But the sculptor was medium-grade sculptor, so commenting on the artist as opposed to the work itself. So that's just a story and showing how careful Lord Atisha was, knowing that this was an object of refuge. And then it says, I think that's where we stopped. Nipa Losong Rinpoche. Drupi Lapcha Nipa Lapsong. Nipa Losong. Drupi Lapcha Som. Tambo the Shaitan Go Gariyana, the Kanga Sanjayan. Then Nipa good sosun. Good so much.
tombo dro tombo.
Okay. Yup, then so.
Lon nanji les chibu seja sejes loba tombo lube gnu na la lambi ngojin chuji chuson chuma yamba jishi sheba lo sube ngeme mandawa chuji shebe
Okay.
ngojin mandawa chuji yebe chusin nyayi rezu jede
Less so.
ane tenpa yo sonji tuyne shaji jabi bado tondo deba sonba dans ta chibu seja sekendo wate kaso kore mendu mabata me jendal chi ngojin pa ngojin wate nage me muda chuji daba yinjiro wate ngeme
Less so.
wate ndebudile go chuji yoken chusin nyayi rezu jeba
Less
res
so.
tenpa yo songi tuyne shaja tobi bado ko tondo deyo
Less
res
so.
nami do wate kuyo res
Less so.
deba sonba o kale juna
Then the Losung, the Delpa Lama song. Okay, so now Rinpoche is just going back through what we just read just quickly. So he's going back to the story from the exegesis of discipline, where Manava Kapila slandered the community of learners and those with no more to learn in 18 different ways. So he called them 18 different names, and then was reborn as a monster with 18 different heads, and those 18 different heads remained intact, and he remained as this monster from the time of Buddha Kashyapa to the time of Buddha Shakyamuni. So this is just the story that's told of that. Dene?
다 손지 셰주 비디오서 네 자수노 냔주해요. 냔주해 노노 추신고 주지 여기도 냐바 소신이 뭐다.
Less so.
진네 어때 소칼로 먹은 것 때문에 딱한도 네 손지 대표는
Less so.
아니 그 주지 여바데 가르치는 거 주지 용버레스 아니 그 아마이만 아마 나한테 라오주스
Ngait Sampa.
그래
Ngait Sampa, the Datayan.
어디 아마 그 다 나비 글론을 렐 하버스 나비 글론을 최 치용고를 파운고를 던들어다 나비 글론을 카타고 말레스 저는 가그레스 아니 그 어디 나비 글론이 나왔더래 전주 뭐 제지로 그 주지 아니 그 제예미들 그 주지 여기 추신야에 수치네
Less so.
요송네 샤자 두비바도 그것도 돼요 아레스
Less so.
남이 더 그용어레스
Less so. Then the Amma,
샤자 두비 어디 주신지라는 저런 거 어디
the Selbudu.
그 그게 소인 봐서 아마 인슬라면도
Less so.
아마 그때 러서 네들로 어디 남에도 그용어레스
Yine Amma Depo Gare. Amma Namen Gare.
아마도 가르고 네 제가
Okay, Diksung. Ngait Sampa. Ngait the Loju Nanglang Ngait Sampa.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's this story. So going to the story, so Monica Pila went to insult the community and was told to by his mom. So he went and insulted them in all of these different ways. And the way that this story goes is there were some people fishing during the time of the Buddha in a beach, that's the word for sand place, a beach. And they were fishing, and someone caught this monster fish with all of these different heads. And then suddenly the Buddha arrived. And when the Buddha arrived, he was able to, through some mysterious power, get the fish to speak. And he began to ask questions back and forth and said, why are you like this? And he said that I'm like this because I called all of these names and so forth to the community. And I called all of these different I called all of these different holy beings names, and now I have a head for each of the names that I called them. And so this was the Buddha magically created this so that he could show the fruition of the karma, the fruitional karma it's called, that took place as a result of this negative action. Diksun.
어제도 가서 르지레 나바서 르지고는 수지바 마진발레 마자바 나고는 준 참아서 중앙지 어디 중앙게 저도 저도 용도 말베스.
So it's very important also, though, that we look at what was prescribed by the teachings in terms of the 10 non-virtues. So we should abandon the 3 non-virtues of our body: killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. We should abandon the 4 non-virtues of our speech: lying, harsh words, divisive speech, and gossip. And we should abandon the 3 non-virtues of our mind, which are harmful intent, covetousness, and wrong view. So it's important that we do so in order to move forward spiritually. Diksun Rinpoche.
어디서 디바도 간투주도 송송마도는 샤나치야 계셔버렸어. 제지파이보다 뇌하다 어디서 디바모보다도 송으로.
So if we, though, are unable to keep all of these activities pure, then we can engage in an acknowledgement of our downfalls. And by acknowledging our downfalls, we can then purify them. So it's important for us to realize that if we do engage in some kind of a negativity, that negativity can and should be purified. Diksun.
저는 대시셔버 다주마 야다바주 선제 배저와 샤저토발 샤설로 아버지는 사진려바 있나 그바 트치기 디바탄르스 어떤 선지 손주송을 그걸 표현한 도와스.
So there are so many practices that we can do in order for our negativities to be purified. And we can recite sutras, and we have the Sutra of the 35 Buddhas of Confession. And just by reciting that, we find there's a commentary that gives the various amounts of time that each of the lines of the 35 Buddhas of Confession is able to purify. And just by reading the first line that says, to the I just don't want to kind of have it, it's right here, to the founder, the Bhagavan, Buddha, the one thus gone. 43, thank you. To the Buddha, to the founder, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfectly completed Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate. So just by doing that, it talks about purifying tens of thousands of eons of non-virtuous karma, and each of the other 34 Buddhas, if you will, have their individual commentaries and how many eons of non-virtue they'll purify. So who said that these non-virtues can be purified? Where did this even come from? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. How do we know that a purification has even taken place? How do we know this? And we know this by examining our dreams. So if we are in good condition, free of illness mentally and physically, in the last part of our dream state, and we have various dreams like climbing a mountain or eating good food or being washed or washing or cleansed, or we just wake up with an overall wonderful feeling from that dream before, we know that a purification has taken place. These are all signs that have been pointed out in Scripture to show us that they have. Diksun. Love, meditation on love, compassion, the mind that aspires to enlightenment, meditation on emptiness, all of these things are so beneficial. So why don't we end here? No? So thank you, everyone. Tu Chenrezig Rinpoche, Sheda Selbuldu.
Yeah, okay.
So clear, I was saying to Rinpoche. And we will do the concluding mandal offering. And
뭐야 버지기나 저 대바지 자존사는 자존 먹은 버스 네 대나지 거와도 사지 고모도 좀 봐이나 사지 고모 마도 좀 버스 말해서 사지 그 송바래서 제가 자주 쫓나 주티다라 자주 먹은 버스 때문에 대신 상주양 거와야 상주 마도 버스 때문에 what the Geshe is.
So now that we've created so much virtue, it's important that we dedicate it properly. Dedication must be done so that our virtue doesn't perish until enlightened. Just like a drop of water from a bucket that's put into the ocean that does not disintegrate or dissolve until the entire ocean does so, likewise, a virtue that's properly dedicated towards enlightenment remains until that enlightenment, that enlightened state occurs, which it is a cause for. So we find this in the scripture where the Buddha has stated this about dedication. So knowing that dedication is so important, let's do that now in a proper way.
사지 고모도 좀 망의 거와데 바네나 트리 나머지서 레비지 베지서 누누서
So if we don't dedicate this virtue properly to enlightenment, our virtuous activity will just be like the fruit of a banana tree that comes up once and then the banana tree, it's over, it's finished. We want our virtue to be a continuous fruit, bear continuous fruit. So whatever each of us do as individuals throughout the day, or whatever we do as individuals, we should always dedicate that virtue to our enlightenment. Thank you. Concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drakpa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well, with whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times. I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Yatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, the spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Tuji Rinpoche Gutsi Shapi Denrelong, Atsu Lamrim Chemo Kongachu Ronong.